Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 900B, and today's date is February 22nd, 2016, and the title of the episode is Peace Agreement Reached by Russia and U.S. on Syria. Is it really peace? Now, before I get started, I just have an announcement. I uploaded an interview with V, the guerrilla economist. You can see this on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. Or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, you'll see it on the right-hand side. Or you can go to newssentinel.com, that's NEWZSENTINEL.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right, you'll see the video there. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, Obamacare was created not for the people, not to help the people with their health insurance problems. Because if that was true, then Congress, the president, they would have been out there in the forefront saying, you know something, Obamacare is so great, we're going to be on national television and take Obamacare. But they didn't, they exempted themselves. And we know what happened. Obama, the insurance agents, they got together, they said, listen, how can we make an incredible profit? How can we get everyone into the system and basically have everyone pay us without giving any type of benefits? I know. We'll get everyone in, we'll raise the premiums, and the government can make money on the back end with taxes. And we'll put a penalty on it to force everyone in. And then we have basically a monopoly on the entire system. And we can continually raise premiums. And guess what? Nobody can say a thing. And this is exactly what they did. And what we're seeing right now is that Obamacare is getting worse and worse for the people as time goes on. Right now, we know deductibles are soaring under Obamacare. And many U.S. hospitals are now attempting to collect medical payments before the services are even rendered. And this is coming from new reports. The financial burden of medical care has increased so much as a result of Obamacare that hospitals, they see the writing on the wall. Many more people than before, they can't pay their deductibles. They can't pay the $3,000, the $4,000, the $5,000. So if you go into a hospital or you go to the doctor or wherever you're going, you have to meet that first. So if your bill is $1,500, people say, well, I can't pay for this. I'm already paying $900 a month for Obamacare. So what people are doing is they're going out and they're taking loans out to pay for the deductibles. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. 5 years ago, an individual employer-sponsored policy had a deductible of about $800. Today, that same exact policy is about $1,217. 50% higher. A family plan back in 2014 is now 31% higher. Since 2006, family plan deductibles have nearly doubled, jumping an average of about $1,034 per family to $1,947. I mean, this does not benefit the people whatsoever. And if you don't meet the deductible, it restarts the next year. So you could be paying the $1,947 for your family every single month with a $3,000 deductible. The insurance company will not kick in until you reach the $3,000 deductible. Think about how much you're paying for medical insurance. Is this really a benefit to the people? No, it is not. We see up in Canada, they are pushing a carbon tax to help out the economy. Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall says bringing a carbon tax right now to an already struggling economy, this is going to be a complete disaster. But we see why they want the carbon tax. This is all part of the plan. The debt is unsustainable. They cannot sustain it. They need more taxes coming in. And you know where these taxes are going to go. They're going to go to pay down the debt. They need to tax the people. When the governments and the central banks fail and the debt is unsustainable, they need to raise and continually raise taxes because they can't handle the interest payments, the debt that's out of control. So they have to think of new ways to do this. Actually, they thought of this carbon tax all the way back in 1970 because they knew their fiat system would only last 40 plus years and the whole thing will come to an end. This is why they've been pushing so hard for this. And they know this entire economy is falling apart. Now, something very interesting with the battle with Apple and the FBI to catch those non-existent terrorists, you know, the entire false flag in San Bernardino. Now, we know that Farouk allegedly has this cell phone and they just can't get into it. And they've been pushing Apple to help get through the encryption. But when you look at this situation closely, the FBI completely messed up. In the San Bernardino Health Department, they initiated a password change on the iCloud account, which completely messed everything up. Because if they didn't do this, it would have been possible to force the phone to back up data to the associated iCloud account, and it would have been available to the FBI. The health department did this password change because the FBI told them to. And Apple is saying that, yes, we will assist, but the FBI completely messed this up. They made it worse for themselves. Now, the question is, why did they do this? Did they do this to push their agenda to get legislation passed where the FBI will be allowed to have backdoors into all the technology companies' encryption? I believe so. This is what they've been pushing all along. Because they want to spy on every single person. They want the back door. They want the people that are going to be a threat to their power structure. This is what they're most nervous about. This is why every single country out there is doing the same thing. Creating these draconian laws. Pushing it as hard as they can to keep the sheep in line. And they'll continually use false flags, fear, and everything else to convince everyone that we need to keep you safe. So this is what we need to do to keep you safe. And the Founding Fathers warned us about this. And we're seeing it firsthand right now. Now, out in South Korea, we realize that the U.S. is working with South Korea to put pressure on North Korea, actually to provoke North Korea. They're using this non-existent nuclear explosion in North Korea, where they said, oh yes, they did it underground, that's why there was an earthquake, and of course there's no evidence whatsoever to support this. There's no radiation, there's absolutely nothing. Basically, it was an earthquake. So the U.S. is using this to push the idea that North Korea is getting ready to attack the U.S. or preparing a nuclear weapon. They use the satellite launch to convince everyone that they're testing their ballistic missile system. And every country launches, not every, but most of the countries launch satellites into space. Actually, a couple weeks later, the U.S. launched a satellite into space. So the U.S. and South Korea, they're going to have the largest ever U.S.-South Korea military drill. So the U.S. is going to deploy a combat aviation brigade to South Korea. The joint U.S.-South Korean exercises scheduled for March will be the largest military drill staged on the Korean Peninsula. And basically it's a warning to North Korea to show that, listen, don't try something. No, but what they're really doing right now is basically provoking all the same players. They're provoking North Korea, they're provoking Russia, they're provoking China, and we see them doing this with all the military assets that are being moved all over the place. In Norway, they're placing military assets in caves to provoke Russia. In China, they're surrounding and encircling China, moving a base to in Japan to Okinawa. And we can see that they're doing this on purpose. They're sailing the ships by the Spratly Islands to push China into doing something. And this is all about provoking. And out in South Korea, there's going to be about 15,000 U.S. troops, twice the number of the previous year. There's going to be 290,000 personnel from South Korea, including special forces, more than double its usual deployment. And this is all to put pressure on North Korea. This is what the United States government central bankers are doing, because they are continually trying to provoke war any way they possibly can. We see out in Libya that the United States went in and bombed Libya. The only problem with this is the U.S. went in with no congressional input. Of course, they're using the 9/11 authorization back in 2001, where they can use force against Al-Qaeda, but this is the Islamic State. This is not Al-Qaeda. And ISIS didn't exist back in September 11th of 2001. So they basically twisted all of this to convince everyone they have permission to do this. The same thing in Syria, the same thing in Iraq. And Congress is saying absolutely nothing. Right now we can see the White House is doing whatever they want. Sounds like a dictatorship to me. They're doing whatever they want because they need to at this point, because the system is collapsing, and they need to go back into Libya, they need to go back into Yemen, they need to go back into Iraq, they need to capture Syria, and then eventually get into Iran to reestablish the petrodollar, because the system is falling apart. This is why we see all of this right now. Everything is connected to the economic collapse. All of it. The system is dying right now. Now, the EU is saying they're not going to go into Libya unless they are invited by the government. Why do you think they're trying so hard to get the unity government? They want to be invited in to basically go fight the elected government, the people who don't want the puppet government in Libya. And this is why they're pushing so hard to get in there. Now we see the National Oil Corporation is saying there's going to be a lot more attacks on our facilities. We need the United Nations-backed unity government. We need it right now. Now, the Libya Parliament, they're going to vote on Tuesday on the new unity government. And if this is approved, guess what? In the next couple of weeks, we're going to see the coalition forces in Libya. It's going to be a whole new campaign. Now, if it isn't approved, they're going to have to think of another way to get into Libya. Maybe a false flag event, which they do quite often. So we're going to have to watch that situation very carefully. They've been planning this for a while right now. France has been flying reconnaissance missions. The bordering countries have closed their borders. Everything is set. They're just waiting for the green light to go. We see out in Syria, the Saudi prince says the U.S.-led airstrikes, it's not enough. We need a ground intervention. Now, do I think Saudi Arabia is going to invade? Do I think Turkey is going to invade? No. They're not going to do this because the world opinion looking at them would say, okay, you just invaded a country. This is why Turkey has been using false flags, like the bombing inside their country, saying it was coming from the Kurds, who is from Syrian nationality. They're trying to figure out a way where they can invoke Article 5 of NATO. Now, I know NATO is out there saying we are not going to be behind Turkey, but if a Turkey is attacked, guess what? NATO will say, well, they were attacked. We have to come to their assistance. And this is what we need to look at right now. Now, at this point, we see the Islamic State and the moderate rebels. They have joined forces in the southeastern area of Aleppo. They have joined together, which they were never separate and apart. It was all part of the same terrorist groups. And now they were fighting Russia and the Syrian army. And, of course, as we know, who supports the rebels and the Islamic State? The United States. Now, over the weekend, during the ceasefire, the peace deal that Russia and the U.S. were trying to put together, there were 34 people killed in a double extremist attack in Homs, Syria. And we know why this happened at the same exact time is because they don't want peace in this area. The U.S. says one thing while they're doing another. Because as we know, Russia put forth a UN resolution for Turkey to stop shelling into Syria, and the United States, France, coalition forces rejected it. So what they're saying to the corporate media and to the American people is completely opposite of what they're actually doing. Now, Assad is out there, and he is worried about terrorists and foreign governments meddling in the truce. He's worried about them reinforcing their positions, attacking while there's a ceasefire, and false flag events, which I can understand why. And we have to remember, Turkey, the United States, NATO, UK, Israel, they're all part of this. Turkey is basically the front man for this entire operation. I mean, there was a photo that was put out that shows that the Islamic State and Turkey are working together, as we know, and they're flying the flag on the pole. The Islamic State flag is on top, the Turkey flag is right below it. And that was put out there on the web. Facebook initially blocked it, and then they unblocked it because a lot of people complained, like, whoa, why are you blocking this? And now we see that it's unblocked. Now, Erdogan is out there, and he said something very interesting. Now, remember, he's the front man to all this. The U.S. is taking the back seat saying, ooh, this is Erdogan, and we're going to use him as the crazy person in this area where he wants war. The U.S. does not want war, but we're going to veto everything in the UN when Russia says, we should have Turkey stop shelling into Syria, which is a sovereign nation. So we have something that's going on in the UN, which is completely different about what the U.S. is really saying. Now, Erdogan came out and said he has the right, Turkey, to carry out military operations not only in Syria, but in any other country which is hosting terror groups that threaten the Turkish state. He says no one can restrict Turkey's right to self-defense. Now, that's the line from the United States, because that's what they always use. You have the right for self-defense. Well, if this is true, then Syria can go into Turkey, because Turkey is basically using terrorism in their country, and it's a direct threat. So Syria has the ability to invade Turkey, if this is what Erdogan really means. But what they're doing right now is they're testing the waters. Because remember what the authorization for war says, that the United States will have the ability to go into any country where there's the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Boko Haram, or any other terrorist organization, if it is a threat to the United States. So this is directly coming from the United States. So Syria is saying, if Saudi Arabia, Turkey invade Syria and send troops in, they're going to treat them as terrorists. So Russia and Syria are saying if they come in, they will be bombed. They will be destroyed. Now, do I think they're going to just invade? No, not at this time. Because what would be the reasoning for the invasion? And the invasion would have to be big. And this is why they're having that drill of 350,000 soldiers or so. So NATO is out there and they're saying, listen, we're not going to support you with the conflict with Russia. But if you're attacked, we might have to relook at the entire situation. And whatever they're saying to the corporate media, it's lip service. Plain and simple. Now, Russia is planning a permanent rotation of their cruise missile carrying corvettes in the Mediterranean. And basically, they're going to keep the corvettes in the Mediterranean permanently with their supersonic speed cruise missiles that have a distance of about 2,000 kilometers. So they know what is happening here, and they're getting prepared. Now, Russia and the United States got together. They agreed on this ceasefire. They're going to start it February 27th. This only goes to the rebels. This is not for the terrorists. Russia and Syria continually go after the terrorists. And all those areas that have been hit, that need humanitarian aid, everyone will get humanitarian aid. And we'll have to see how this goes. And this starts on Saturday, February 27th. And Assad, right after this, came out, says, okay, we're going to have elections, parliamentary elections, starting April 13th, 2016. What does this tell us? This tells us that if the people elect once again in favor of Assad, this is going to pose a problem for the United States. And this can either work one or two ways. The U.S. gets in there and they try to manipulate the elections, or Assad's party wins the elections, and this makes it harder for the United States. So the United States most likely will have to do something before the April deadline. Some type of false flag or something. Because they're running out of time here. Now, think about this for a second. Assad, with Russia's help, has been liberating towns, cities. The people are very happy about this. The Islamic State is being pushed back. And this shows us that the people in Syria are going to look at this as a major victory and say Assad is working for the people. And I don't see a downside with these elections unless they're fixed. And this is going to be a big problem for the U.S. So what does the U.S. do at this point? Did they spend all this money, all these resources, all the lies and the propaganda to just walk away from Syria? I don't think so. I think we're going to see some type of an event occur. But we're going to have to watch the situation very closely. I'm hoping that the ceasefire, the peace deals, it works out. The U.S. leaves Syria and the whole thing's scrapped. But I just can't see it ending that way. I don't believe the U.S., the neocons, are going to do that at this point. Because what that means is the entire system just falls apart. And everyone blames the U.S. and the central bank. So when we step back and we look at the entire situation, Turkey has not stopped provoking Syria. They're continually doing it. I mean, right now Turkey is sending in the Islamic State fighters, military advisors, weapons from Kiev, and they're manufacturing and developing biological and chemical weapons to be used in this area. Now think about it. They're having these drills which consists of 350,000 troops or so, a lot of tanks. At the same time, Russia is having their drills of about 190,000 military people in South Russia. Because they realize that the buildup of all these forces, if something should happen, like a false flag, the drill that's going on with all these soldiers, they're going to move into Syria. So Russia is having their drill just to the north of Turkey in South Russia to say, hey, listen, if you decide to invade, our troops will be right behind you. You'll have fighting in front of you. You'll have fighting behind you. You will be surrounded. So we're going to have to watch this entire scenario very, very carefully. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.